Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as what if Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
I hope you are feeling very well. As you can see, here I leave you with a new chapter of this Mother series. Without further ado, I'll leave you with the video. Victory cannot be achieved without sacrifice. Victor Resnov. Minato. Sunlight poured into the hospital. It was a cold and cool light, appropriate for the beginnings. Inside the hospital room, the light fell on Minato's face and touched an opening there, pulling his lips, making the shadow. Smile was more radiant. The light flowed through the room, scattering 1,000 little rainbow beginnings on the bright medicine bottle. So, Minato, have you decided on the name for the child yet? A curious Jiraiya asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Yes, indeed we have. I think you'll like it, Jiraiya-sensei. Minato replied. Well, then let it go, Brad. What did you decide to call it? Naruto, Minato said simply, allowing his smile to grow wider. It was the name of the protagonist of his teacher's first novel, The Night of the Attack. An involuntary shiver ran down Minato's back as he turned to see who was behind him. No one? His eyes narrowed instantly. All appearance of emotion disappeared from his face, showing now a cold cruelty. The face of a dog. Rebel. Who are you? As soon as the words came out of his clenched teeth, someone materialized right in front of him. He observed the man's appearance. He was wearing a long black coat and a white mask with waves in the design and a hole for one. Oh God, was that a Sharingan? I'm Toby. Nice to meet you, Okage-san. I know as well as you that the name you just gave me is a fake. Who are you really? What do you want? Oh, I thought Konoha's Yondaime Okage was supposed to be a genius at deduction. Surely you can tell my identity. Entity with a look, do that trick of yours now. Deduce who I am. Toby's voice seemed falsely cheerful. Minato sighed. I really didn't have time for this. At first glance, I would say that you are an Uchiha. But you're not. If you were, you'd be a missing ninja, except for the fact that there hasn't been a missing Uchiha ninja in history. Last 7 years, the masked man shuddered. Therefore, you are not an Uchiha. And you look young, I'd say you're about 17, 18 years old. That leaves us with only one alternative. Since you have chosen to reveal only one Sharingan, and the fact, if you wear a mask to cover your face. I would say that you found an Uchiha in battle, killed him and took his eye. Toby took another step towards Minato. The masked man's look told him he was wrong. The man was angry. I see I was wrong about that. Ah, well. But it seems that you know me. I can see the recognition in your eyes. The masked man squirmed again. And you're angry. I could go on, but I really don't have time to fight with a kid right now. I suggest you go back to the place you came from before you get hurt. The masked man laughed. It was an outburst of manic and crazy laughter. The laughter of someone who has lost everything. Very well done, Okage-san. You're still the same as always. However, I am a little disappointed. I thought that, of all people, you would recognize me. I guess I've changed a lot more than I thought. I thought so, Toby said, sighing. Minato, however, was even faster than Toby. Depending on who you asked, he was the fastest ninja that ever lived. The technique Toby was using was definitely a space-time jutsu. He knew that it would be difficult to fight this strange jutsu. But he had observed that Toby needed about 2 seconds before performing the technique again. And that openness was all I needed. The two shinobi collided, and this time Minato. He managed to use the opening. The three-pronged Y-cradle reached his hands as fast as lightning as he cut Toby's arm in the 2-second window before he could use the technique. Again, when they separated, Toby was bleeding. For a moment, the fight stopped when Toby inspected the cut on his arm. It seems that I underestimated you, Okage-san. You've only gotten better over the years. Minato's lips curved upwards as he started to run. Again, the two collided, over and over again. It wasn't until 10 minutes had passed to last 10 minutes against him. The fastest ninja in the world was a feat in itself, which Minato was able to find an opportunity to use again. He threw the kunai, both close, his Rasengan passed over his shoulder. I won. Suddenly, Minato disappeared, grabbing the kunai in the air before hitting his back with his Rasengan, causing a huge crater. Minato looked around and saw Toby squeezing his right arm before he started to fall to the ground, and instead of blood, a white goo came out. The masked man was about to flee when Minato teleported in front of him and hit his chest with his hand. Seal of contract. Back on the battlefield, Kurama was finishing his beast bomb with a tail when the Sharingan in his eyes slowly disappeared. Before the bomb was dropped on the village, he raised his head at the last second and threw the bomb into the air. After a few seconds, the bomb exploded, caused a bright light that illuminated the entire arena around Idenli's village and beyond. Suddenly, a huge wave of wind hit the village with such force that some small trees were shattered. To his surprise, the third cage opened his eyes again after the light went out, but Kyuubi was gone. He was there. The only thing was a huge crater where Kyuubi, Minato had been, outside of Konoha. In the darkness of the night, you could hear the loud cries of a baby, his blonde hair, blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each cheek. Naruto, a voice suddenly said, looking at his son, how it had gone so wrong, he did not know. The masked man had attacked them out of nowhere. He was wearing a mask and had short dark hair and Sharingan. The man who was looking at the baby had long blonde hair that reached to his shoulders. His wife, Kushina Uzumaki, was close to him. I'm sorry, Kushina, but I couldn't control anything. The voice of the giant fox was heard behind them. Kushina turned her head to look at him. She smiled sadly and shook her head. It wasn't his fault. The masked man had taken over Kyuubi and then summoned him in the middle of the village. He had started killing and destroying everything in his path until Minato cancelled his label contract, but the damage was already done. Then, Minato takes Kushina, Naruto and Kurama outside the village to seal him inside Naruto. Kushina didn't have that much time because Kyuubi was extracted from her. Despite being a Uzumaki, she knew her time was coming, her legs felt weaker. Minikin, are you sure about this? We both know how the Hinchirikis are treated, Kushina asked, fearing that Naruto would not have a happy childhood. He would already have a hard life because he would not have his parents to raise him, advise him and see him from. Her first steps, her first word, and telling her stories when she's scared. But the worst thing of all is that the pain for your loved ones would probably blind them, and it would be harder for your baby. Naruto had only a few minutes and could be treated harshly due to the pain. Minato looked at her sadly. He was thinking the same thing, but he had no other choice. I can't tell anyone else to sacrifice their children, and who better than the village council to seal Kurama. He looked at Naruto, who seemed to be sleeping. I trust Irasen, he will take care of him, and the same for Jiraiya-sensei, she replied to convince. I told her that everything would be fine, but at this point I wasn't sure who I was convincing. After that, he turned to Kurama, who had his gaze fixed on Naruto, and his eyes showed surprise. The fourth Hokage didn't know why the big fox looked at Naruto with a surprised face, but he didn't have time to ask. Minato took a deep breath. Take care of Naruto, Kurama. I believe in you, Minato affirmed. The giant fox turned to him and nodded his head, and then turned to Kusi, who knelt down near Naruto and touched his whiskers. Even if no one cares about him, I will always be there. For him, Kurama promised. That brought a big smile on Kushina's face, who shed tears and turned to Kurama. Thank you for being my friend Kura, she said smiling, and the big fox smiled back. Minato then made some hand signals to call Shinigami. What do you want, mortal? The blinder asked him, his tongue licking his big knife. Minato was panting and turned to look at him with no fear in her eyes. I want you to seal Kyuubi inside Naruto, Minato demanded, showing no fear of the Shinigami. The Shinigami narrowed his eyes before nodding. Slowly Kurama shrank inside Naruto, who was still sleeping peacefully. A seal that looked like the Uzumaki symbol, a spiral, formed on his stomach. You have a few minutes, Shinigami stated. Minato managed to smile slightly before slowly walking towards Naruto, who was in Kyuubi's arms. She was rocking him in her arms. The tears rolled down her cheeks. His eyes turned to look at Naruto's palms, and he noticed a sun on his right palm, and he turned his eyes to his left palm. To see a moon. Minato wondered what that symbol was, but he didn't have time for that anymore, not anymore. Lying down close to his wife, he looked at what his love had brought to this world. A beautiful boy, he is perfect in every possible way. His hands slowly reached Kyuzi's red hair. His thumb touched her soft and beautiful red hair. Kushina kept looking at Naruto. She didn't want to believe that her time was limited. How much she wished that she and Minikin could stay like this forever. Kyuzikin, we have to say goodbye. Suddenly he heard Minato's voice. She nodded her head slowly. He looked at Naruto again. His eyes slowly opened to reveal ocean blue eyes like Minato's. She smiled at her treasure, and Naruto smiled a little. He recognizes us, Kushina thought. Naruto, my baby, I know you will have a hard time without us, but you must meet Minikin, and I love you more than life itself. With time you will grow up, and with time it will come naturally to you that you like girls. Choose a girl who loves you, who is always there for your happiest moments and your lowest points. And soon you will meet Jiraiya. Don't be like him, but he is still a good man who will take care of you. I love you. Misoki, Kushina said, tears streaming down her cheeks. Minato smiled at Naruto, and his son smiled back. Naruto, I want you to become what you want. Do something that brings you happiness. Kakashi will be there for you too, I know. Please, if you become a shinobi, be strong and take care of your loved ones. And as your mother told you, choose a girl who loves you and who is. A little impulsive, Minato felt everything slowly going dark. The last thing she saw was her son crying in Kyuzi's arms before everything went dark and his head fell to the cold floor. Kushina's chest was barely rising. He could hear Naru crying in his arms, but his whole body began to feel numb, first his legs. And now his arms no longer felt anything. With her eyes still on her treasure, with her last strength, she smiled at him, and her chest stopped rising. Naruto started crying even more, and he wouldn't stop. His blue eyes slowly changed, his pupil shrank, and his eyes began to change color from blue to metallic purple. The white area of his eyes completely disappeared, and left his eyes completely purple. 3 rings appeared in a wavy pattern from the center. His eyes remained like that for a few moments before returning to his normal blue eyes. Office of the Hokage. Sarutobi was alone in his office, deep in his thoughts. The only sound that could be heard in the office was Naruto crying with all his heart. He had been crying ever since old Hokage found him. Even though she tried to cheer him up somehow, he didn't stop. She kept crying, and she wouldn't stop. Due to the sudden attack of the Kirugi, the Konoha hospital was full of injured people. The remaining nurses and doctors were doing everything they could to save people. To old Hokage's surprise, a ninja doctor checked on Naruto to see if he needed anything. Naruto was perfectly healthy and only needed milk. A nurse feeds Naruto, but the newborn starts crying again after that. Hokage didn't understand how things could have gone wrong so quickly, and the place was secured. So why did this happen? Minato was there to make sure that he won't escape, but it seems that wasn't enough. Feeling a headache, he massaged his temples. How Kyuubi escaped and ended up attacking the village was a mystery, but old Hokage had another question in mind. The strange symbols on Naruto's palms, a sun and a moon. After putting Naruto in the crib, the old Hokage started looking through the books for anything that could help in his situation. But it seemed that there was nothing there. Suddenly the door opened. A pale-looking Jiraiya entered. His usual happy face had disappeared. Instead, a frowning sign had conjured up his face. The last time old Hokage remembered his student looking like this was when Nawaki and Dan died on the battlefield. Tsunade still hasn't been able to move on since Dan's death. Jiraiya, I'm what happened. Jiraiya intervened him. The old Sannin had been out of the village to fulfill his espionage duty when he received a toad informing him of the tragedy in Konoha. He had originally wanted to wait until Naruto turned 1 month old to see him, but instead, he received information that his precious student was no longer his son, in everything but name. I don't know how it happened. Kirubi appeared in the middle of the village out of nowhere. Minato took him a few kilometers outside of Konoha to seal him inside Naruto. Kushina had been unable to survive the extraction, and Minato sealed Kirubi. Using Azal's Reaper, the third cage said in a low tone, barely a whisper. Jiraiya closed his eyes and took it all in. Her student had left. How could it have gone so wrong? She felt tears in her eyes, but she didn't want to cry now. He shouldn't. She opened her eyes again, took a deep breath, and looked at the blonde bundle that had fallen silent in the room. He seemed to be tired of crying and had stayed asleep. As she approached him, she noticed his sunny hair like Minato's, with whiskers on each side of his cheek. Her cheeks were red and swollen, as were her eyes. Looking at him now, Jiraiya could see the similarities. Looking closely at his face, for a moment, he felt as if he were Minato. Turning her head away in fear and sadness, she couldn't look at him at that moment, and that reminded her a lot of Minato. He felt his sadness grow again, like a violent river that took over his entire body, towards the darkness of the abysses. Jiraiya, his thoughts were shattered when he heard his lord's voice. In his ears. Pinching the bridge of his nose and wiping away the unshed tears, he turned his head, almost feeling heavier. Sunflower. I know how you feel, the Sannin wanted to say no, but he remembered that his wife had died in the attack and kept his mouth shut. But Minato chose you as Naruto's godfather. You are his guardian, and I want to know what you will do. The third one asked quietly, hoping not to be in a hurry, and Jiraiya didn't feel pressured to make a decision so soon. I paused and turned around, not daring to look at his sensei at that moment. I need to make sure the other villages don't try to attack us. Kumo and Iwa will think of this as an open invitation to war, and my job is to protect him, she stated, pointing to the newborn. And I will? From the outside. To make sure that no enemy village attacks Konoha, Jiraiya finished as if trying to convince himself more than the Hokage. Sighing, he knew that they needed what Jiraiya was hinting at. Very well, but I hope you will come back soon, Hokage said, and Jiraiya nodded his head after a moment of hesitation. Leaving the office almost in a hurry, the old Hokage heard Naruto start crying again. Council chamber. That same night, the nurse fed Naruto again and checked on him again to make sure he was healthy after a long checkup. The nurse said the baby was as healthy as a baby can be. To Sarutobi's surprise, he said that he had never seen a healthier baby than Naruto. A meeting was called to discuss what they had lost, the cost of rebuilding the village, and the empty place left of the Hokage. The fox was gone, non-existent, as if it had never been there. The yondaime also left, and his spirit departed into the belly of the Shinigami. He left behind a wife who followed him into the abyss and a son just a few hours old, whom he had entrusted to the most fearsome of beasts in prison. In truth, it was a sad day in Konohagakure. The old Sarutobi, the Sandai Myokai, was standing with a small blonde baby in his arms. The baby slept soundly, unaware of the gathering of elders who had gathered to decide his fate. Sarutobi did not know why the fools had gathered. The fate of the child was already decided, and Sarutobi intended to keep his fate unchanged. He listened as the council argued back and forth, some for killing the baby, some for saving him, honoring the wishes of his dead brother. This was a difficult time for the people and patience was running out. Even for someone of infinite patience like Sarutobi, he had never had to raise his voice to convey his message before. One does not get the title of shinobi god by being loud and spontaneous. Ninja is calm, serene, silent, and deadly. All of these things encompassed what Sarutobi stood for. What set him apart from the rest was his high level of intelligence. And that intelligence would grant him a successor, and save the village in this time and in future times. No one noticed when she got up from her seat, with the baby still sleeping peacefully in her arms. That's enough. Shut up. The room immediately fell silent, and even the little adult in his arms woke up and looked at him reverently. But he did not make any sound. He smiled at the blonde wonder and then turned his gaze to the council. I've sat and listened to your nonsense for quite some time. This child will not be killed. It will not be turned into a meaningless weapon. It will not be used. He is a son of Konoha, and he contains within him the most powerful power of beasts. He deserves our respect above all else. An anonymous member of the council, one of the civilians, stood up. But Mr. Hokage, the Kyuubi could be released at any time. The knowledge of the seal says that his soul is linked to the child's, and that, after the child's death, he will die with him. Wouldn't it be better to kill him now and avoid future problems? Saratev and narrowed his eyes at the civilian and spoke in a calm voice. This child will not be killed. His own life is a sacrifice. Even if the Kyuubi dies, he will be reborn after 9 years in the same place where he died. The Yondaime chose him to hold the Kyuubi, and he believed that his people would see this boy as he is. That said, many members of the civil council pale at the thought of Kyuubi returning. And what is he? Someone asked. A hero? A Hinshiriki? It is a living sacrifice and a living testimony of the tenacious control of life by a human being. I'll make sure this kid serves Konoha. I may love the people of this village, but if the leaders themselves can't, if I can tell the difference between a harmless child and the most murderous of all demons, then how can I trust the villagers to let him to live a peaceful life? He picked up the child and spread it out for everyone to see. The blonde laughed and waved her arms cheerfully. Sarutobi allowed a small smile to cross his face. Now, look at this child and tell me where the malice is. Where is the unbridled hatred and rage that the Kirub exuded? Where is the fear that should be present in all of you if he were the Kirub? But it could be a trick of the Kyuubi to lure us into false hopes. It could be pretending to be harmless. Saratev and frowned and wrapped the baby in his diapers. And exactly how does such a child differ from any other newborn? What newborn does not look at the world with amazed eyes? This baby was born into a cold and harsh world on the worst night in the history of our village. He will be ostracized. And I will hate if he mixes among the villagers, and I will not allow that. I will make sure that the child becomes a ninja of exceptional quality. I will make sure he is pure of heart and loyal to the village. And how do you intend to guarantee all that? I will be busy at my job as an Okage, but I will visit him from time to time, making sure he is happy, Okage replied to Danzo, who looked at both the old Okage and the newborn weapon. Irison had decided to keep the strange symbol on Naruto's palms a secret. And I didn't need any more attention than I already had. A man from the clan chiefs stood up. The man was known as Fugaku Uchiha. Mr. Okage, let me raise Naruto. The Uchiha clan would welcome him with open arms, Fugaku spoke in a neutral tone. At first, he wanted to mention that Kushina was a good friend of his wife. Therefore, she would be more than happy to raise Naruto. But he still wasn't sure if old Okage would reveal to everyone who Naruto's parents were. Danzo narrowed his eyes as Irison's facial expression didn't change from the outside. No. If he were to give Naruto to any clan, his power and influence would increase, thus breaking the balance in the village. Naruto will grow up in an orphanage, Irison stated, ignoring Danzo's gaze. Fugaku sighed, disappointed that he could be a good friend of Sasuke, but decided to keep his mouth shut. Leaning back in the chair, Sarutobi decided to end the meeting. This meeting ended, Sarutobi spoke, and left the room with Naruto, who was sleeping. Upon leaving, Shukakunara shook his head in disappointment. He turned to his friends and motioned for them to follow him. Everyone left, and Danzo quickly arrived at his office. As he closed the door, he snapped his fingers, and 2 guns knelt in front of him. I want you to spy on Naruto Uzumaki, blonde hair, 3 mustaches on each cheek, newborn, the Hinshiriki of the Kyuubi. I want any valuable information, Danzo stated, and they both left as if they had never been there. To begin with, he'll be mine soon. Any man who says I am the kingdom is the true king, Tywin Lannister. The sun was shining with a golden glow through the open windows of the location office. The summer heat made its way even to the deep ravines of the blood-wrinkled hands, relieving the pains of worn-out joints and the onset of arthritis. Although faced with a 3-hour-long mountain of paperwork, Konohagakure's Sandai Miokai took a moment to the joy of a summer afternoon. He inhaled the smell of dirt and hot leaves, a slight tinge of smoke from the smell of compost. Even the sounds of his village floated on the gentle breeze. A laugh here, the noise of a car there. A light knock on his office door. Go ahead, he shouted, straightening the official hat that lay, abandoned, on his desk. A tall man entered the room, moving as if neither the decree of gravity nor the limitations of joints and bones applied to him. The handle of a sword protruded from behind one shoulder. Okusama is Naruto, the Ambu spoke, and the third one shuddered before immediately going out the window. Earlier, the streets of Konoha were crowded this morning as people were returning from work and families were going out for dinner. The murmurs of the crowd and their footsteps were loud as they were carried over the rooftops. In a small corner of isolation, a 5-year-old boy was sitting. Or 6 years, looking at the crowd with a pair of sad-looking blue eyes. He had a kind of home. A small apartment where he lived alone, but he did not like being there very much. Sitting on his bed alone and in silence was unbearable for him. For some reason, he preferred to sit as he was now. I was watching and listening to the crowd from a distance. Sometimes he walked through the crowd pretending to be one of them. I would have swapped places with any of them if I could. If I walked for a while next to someone, I could almost imagine that I was not alone. But the look of the crowd when he was outdoors was as bad as being alone in his own way. Those eyes made him feel cold, and the warmth that people had just shown on their faces vanished when they noticed his presence. He felt as if he had done something wrong, but he could never guess what it was. Even now, as he sat watching, some people passing by would notice him, and he could instantly feel the chilling effect of his impersonal eyes. He ducked his head in his arms to avoid them. It was his only defense. "What are you doing there alone?" The boy looked up quickly, surprised by love. Skill in the man's voice. It was an older man with gray hair on his temples who had spoken. His face showed a pleasant smile. The kind the boy had often seen, but had never received. The words escaped the blond boy in this unfamiliar situation. He just watched as the man took a few steps towards the ally so he could get a better look at the boy in the gloom. "Are you alone?" "Which one are you?" The man stopped half a step, recognizing the child. The smile disappeared from his face, and his jaw tightened as he struggled internally. The boy felt a chill rise to his heart as he saw the kindness and warmth dissipate before him. Again he wondered why. The man took a step back, his eyes clouded. "It's you? I hope you feel every pain you brought to this village." He could only blink and watch as the scenario was repeated. It was not at all uncommon for people to act like that with him. The man was back at the entrance of the ally. "Now, my child," the man shook his head to the ground. "If you had never come, she would still be there." He couldn't finish the sentence as he covered his mouth and left. Some in the passing crowd noticed and watched the boy for a while before continuing on to wherever they were headed. The little blond boy sat motionless even after the man left. His body and mind felt numb from the cold he felt in his heart. I would cry, but I couldn't. Something about the way people treated him made him feel like it was his fault. That they should be the ones crying, while he had no right. People ignored him, everyone ignored him, they didn't hurt him physically, but they always threw hateful looks at him. Naruto heard the whispers around him, calling him a monster. Some people called him a demon, but the little blonde guy never understood why. Despite not having suffered any physical harm, the looks, the words, and the loneliness I felt every day were worse than any harm I could receive. He was expelled from the orphanage when he turned 4, and forced to live on the streets until an ambo with a dog mask found him. The next day, the Okage gave him a place to live, a roof over his head to live, alone. The Okage was kind, but whenever I asked him, "Who were my parents?" he would reply that they gave their lives for the people, but nothing more. Just a vague answer with no real meaning behind it. Other times he tried to change the subject, but Naruto noticed all that. He could feel that the Okage lied to him, but he was the Okage and not the after all. Compared to him, he was just a child with no one to take care of him, no power to protect himself. Naruto was just a little kid with no one around, no one to call Tachan, no one to call Kachan, no one to call family. No one who loves him. The word itself seemed strange to Naruto. I knew what it meant, but at the same time I didn't know. I had tried several times talking to kids his age, but their parents always pushed them away, telling them that Naruto was nothing but trouble. Naruto had wanted to read books to pass the time, but the orphanage made sure to never allow his books until 3 months ago. Naruto couldn't even read or write. Learning to read and write was the best day for Naruto. The hours passed, and he continued to sit, waiting for the sadness to disappear so that he could return to his empty house. The streets were empty at that late hour, and the city was silent. It was in this deep silence that he thought he heard something. It was a faint sound. but it seemed to get louder in his ears as he concentrated on it. It was rhythmic. Drip, drip, drip. He closed his eyes to concentrate more. The sound became even louder. It started to sound like he was right next to her when she opened her eyes and found herself in an unfamiliar place. It was a huge and very dark room. The ground was only slightly flooded, but the water was up to his knees because he was so small. He pressed his lips together, feeling afraid. Although only slightly, he began to walk, and his curiosity grew as they did so. I really didn't want to leave this place. I didn't want to go back to the Ally or home. While I was scared, I also had a strange feeling about this place. Or maybe it was the lack of emotion. In any case, he recognized that he was not alone here. He walked until he came to a huge door that was tightly closed. The guy he thought was supposed to keep him out. Until he heard a hoarse sigh from inside the darkness. Then it seemed more likely that it was to prevent something from coming out. The blonde peeked into the darkness behind the bars, looking for the source of the breath. Before Naruto could get closer to see who or what was behind the door, he suddenly felt a look behind him. But he felt no malice coming from this one. No, this one felt calm, even calmer than the Hokage's gaze. I felt the feeling I had in nature, a sense of peace and belonging. Turning around slowly, almost afraid that whoever was looking at him kindly would disappear. And Naruto would understand that it was just his imagination. Completely turned around, he saw strange purple eyes looking directly into his eyes. Naruto didn't know why, but he felt that he had seen the older man before. The man looked old, but the most surprising thing, he was floating on the ground, with his legs in a crossed position. And under him there were 6 strange dark balls. At first glance, the balls looked normal, only dark in color, but Naruto could feel something strange, a sensation. Naruto's attention turned to the older man again, and he had a long pointed beard and 2 fangs on his forehead. Slightly pale skin, her hair pointed and brown, and a strange little red circle on her forehead had smaller dark circles. She was wearing a long white kimono that covered her entire body, and on her chest were 6 painted tamo. Despite being old, Naruto could feel the crazy strength in him. His chakra was huge. Compared to the location, he felt like a dragon compared to an ant. Naruto remained silent, not knowing what to say. I still wasn't sure where I was. "It's good to see you, Asura and Indra," the man called to Naruto with melancholy in his tone, taking Naruto by surprise. Talking to him as if he knew him, but Naruto was sure that he had never seen the man before. "Indra, Asura. Who are they? And why do you call me that?" Naruto wondered, and for a moment, he thought the older man was wrong. But the strange cold feeling he usually got when someone lied to him wasn't there this time. Naruto opened his mouth to reply, but found no words coming out of his mouth and closed it. He took the necessary courage and asked, Who are you? And why do you call me Indra and Asura?" Naruto asked respectfully and without looking into the older man's eyes. Despite feeling calm and her gaze was kind towards him, Naruto had understood the hard way not to look into the eyes of people you don't know. Some people. The shops had started throwing things at him this time. On another occasion, he had wanted to look at a mask, but the buyer had pushed him sharply to the ground, his back hurt all day. But the worst thing, the buyer had thrown the mask at his head with such force that the front had started to bleed. Naruto had looked around the crowd of people that had gathered to see if anyone wanted to help him. Or maybe looking at the buyer with disapproval and anger. But instead, the crowd had looked at Naruto with anger, earning approving glances from them. A crowd had gathered around him, and, for a moment, Naruto feared that they would start hitting him, but after a minute, the crowd had split up, some dazzling daggers at him, piercing his little heart like knives. Naruto had cried himself to sleep that night, talking to himself, asking, wondering why no one was with him. Escaping from his thoughts, the older man chuckled and smiled at Naruto, which the blonde one gladly returned. He smiled and spoke with a tone almost like that of an old friend. "My name is Agoromo Otsutsuki. I am what people know as the Sage of the Six Paths," he introduced himself, still smiling warmly at the little boy in front of him. Agoromo looked at the symbol of the moon and the sun on his palms. She had no doubt who the child was and could swear that she saw her children standing behind Naruto like guards. Asura with her usual happy face, but almost looking cautious. While Indra had a cold and hard look in her eyes, her Magiccio Sharingan shone like a dark red star. His Magiccio looked like the symbol of the Uzumaki clan. Behind his back was tied the war fan, Gumbai. His face was as impassive as the day he fought Asura. Naruto noticed where the older man was looking, moving his palms behind his back, almost scared. He knew about the strange symbols on his palms. He even asked the Hokage what they meant, and to Naruto's surprise. Actually, the Hokage didn't know the answer. Naruto, of course, had tried to eliminate him. He recalled that once he wanted to wash it for almost an hour straight without stopping, thinking that that was the reason why people hated him after this woman had called him a freak, and that the symbol was there to prove it to everyone who is a monster or fit human form. Hiding her hands, she turned to look at the older man again with a confused look. Sage of the Six Paths? Naruto asked with a small voice, almost afraid to ask, his eyes still focused on the ground. Agoromo frowned, his disgust was visible. I really didn't understand why the Kage would let the village treat Naruto like that. It's almost as if he wants Naruto to betray the village. The Hinshiriki is supposed to be the village's most secret weapon. Literally everyone in the village knows his identity, when it is supposed to be top secret, so that the information will not be come out into the open, and no enemy shinobi will try to assassinate you, and thus get rid of the most powerful asset of the village. Not only that, but the Vihul would be revived in the place where he died, and without the fourth Hokage, this time. And without a Uzumaki to sustain Kurama's insane strength, the village would be destroyed. Knowing that the boy didn't know who he was, Agoromo smiled again, trying to ease the tension the boy was feeling. You don't have to be afraid of me, Naruto, as to who I am. People all over the world know me as the father of all shinobi. I walked this earth almost 2 millennia ago. Naruto gasped at the information and immediately bowed his head respectfully. But she decided not to say anything, as she didn't know it would be appropriate to speak without being asked. Like I said, you don't need to be afraid. And we don't do that here. I'm sure you have questions, so feel free to ask, he spoke to Goromo with a friendly tone. Naruto didn't say anything, but he could sense that the old man really meant it, so he took a step forward. His hands slowly moving forward, and they were no longer hiding behind his back. Slightly relaxed, he decided to ask a question. Why are you here? And how are you, alive? Naruto asked, but almost certain that the man in front of him couldn't possibly be alive. At least not in the way humans are usually alive. Agoromo laughed at him. I'm really not alive, and I won't be here for long. I'm here thanks to you, he spoke Agoromo and pointed to his palms. Naruto, understanding, looked down at his palms almost hesitantly. Do you know why I have strange symbols? Naruto asked, looking at the older man again. The moon and the sun show that you are the reincarnation of my children. Asura Otsutsuki and Indra Otsutsuki, answered Goromo, and saw the gears working on Naruto's head. After a second, Naruto arched his eyebrows. Reincarnated? Why is that? Naruto asked, but at the same time, he really couldn't believe it. I knew a shinobi could do a lot of things, but reincarnation is something I've never heard of. Again, he did not know much as his sources of books and materials for reading and acquiring knowledge were very limited. The old Hokage gave him enough to eat, drink, and buy some things, but unfortunately all the stores sold it at 3 times the price. Therefore, he leaves her almost no money to spend on books, much to her chagrin. Naruto had wanted for some time to ask the older man to give him more money, probably, but he thought he had no more. But at the same time, Naruto wondered if his parents had left him anything. If they were shinobi, just like Hokage said, then the chances that they would have left him something were high. My son Asura and Indra were brothers, but at the same time enemies. My son Asura believed that people working together is where true strength comes from, while Indra believed that only your own strength mattered. Strength. After I announced that Asura would be my heir, my other son Indra betrayed us and started a war that never ended. My son Indra reincarnated again in Madara Uchiha, and my son Asura reincarnated in Esirama Senju. They fought each other, continuing the war. He stopped with pain in his eyes and looked straight in the eyes of Naruto. Until you were born, she ended with a hint of relief and pride in her tone. Naruto understood what he meant, but at the same time, he wondered why that would happen. He knew who Senhua Shibama was. The first Kage was still known as the god of the shinobi. He had never heard of Uchiha Madara, but he must have been strong from what he told Goromo. But this confused Naruto. He wasn't from the Uchiha clan, damn it. Naruto was sure that he did not belong to any clan as far as he knew. He had the name Uzumaki, but no clan in Konoha had that name, and no one said anything about a real Uzumaki clan. And he was completely sure that he didn't belong to the Senju clan, so why would they reincarnate into him? As if he could read her mind, Agoromo raised his hand and spoke. The reason is because you are the son of Uzumaki, Senju, and the Uchiha clan. Just like me, Agoromo stated with a smile. Naruto was surprised and opened his eyes a lot. Instinctively, he took half a step back from Agoromo, that is impossible. If that's true, why haven't I been raised by the Uchiha clan, and I've never heard of the Uzumaki clan? Naruto stated with happiness and anger in his tone. He gritted his teeth, squinted his eyes, and his knuckles turned milk-white. If what the older man was saying was true, why didn't he have a family? His parents might be dead, but what about the others? The others of his clan didn't care to raise him, or they saw me as a monster. Naruto wondered at the end, with a tear in his right eye, did they abandon him? Did no one really love him? Did they call him a demon behind his back like everyone else? I do not know why Naruto was interrupted by a third voice in the Great Dark Hall. Maybe I could answer that. Naruto looked around to see who was talking, when he saw a pair of giant red eyes staring at them from behind bars. The blonde man didn't know why, but he didn't feel scared or threatened by the creature behind bars. He felt relaxed, and it was a feeling he usually had whenever he ate ramen to Ishiraku. Agoromo chuckled and turned to look at Kurama kindly. It's been a long time, Kurama. Otsutsuki Asura was chosen as Ninsu's successor because of his ideals of peace. However, this did not sit well with his older brother, Otsutsuki Indra. Indra thought that since he was the eldest, he should lead the world instead of his father. Angry with his younger brother and his father, he tried to fight his brother for the position. After the battle between them, Indra, feeling humiliated by his brother's defeat, left promising to destroy Asura and his brothers. Asura took his role as Ninsu's successor very seriously, even going so far as to travel to the four corners of the world like his father, hoping to teach people about the special property that allowed to be one with him, not only with nature, and to be one with everyone too. He even gained some followers during his trip. Like his father, he also shared his chakra with his followers. Her children started calling themselves Inju Uzumaki. He had 2 sons and a daughter. On the other hand, when Indra heard the exploits of his younger brother, he also gained some followers, who were against the ideals of peace through love and wanted to bring peace to the world only through power. His children gained the power of the Sharingan. He had 4 sons and 2 daughters. His descendants began to call themselves Uchiha, ironically, who also hated the descendant of Asura. Time caught up with him, as with all living beings, and took him away. Life. Indra, who was a genius, also met a similar fate. For all his natural genius, he was also someone far removed from time. Everyone had to die at some point. Their descendants fell far short of the wishes of their ancestors. They forgot their burden and tasks that they should have realized through his blood. Naruto looked at the giant fox behind bars. The Kyuubi had an orange and silky-looking coat, with black markings around the eyes connected to its, interestingly, rabbit ears. The upper part of the body was humanoid, even, including the hands. The lower part of the body was like a fox, except for the 9 long tails that swayed on the back. The fire was as close as they looked. The red, squinting eyes looked at him closely with a hint of malice. Naruto spoke first. "You are the Kyuubi." Naruto half screamed, and suddenly everything made sense to him. It clicked in his head when he had just found the last missing piece of the puzzle. The looks, the words, the hatred behind everyone's eyes suddenly took on meaning. Kyuubi was sealed inside him. Naruto's face pales, and he finds himself looking down. He had many questions in his head, but many of them, why me? Why did the room seal Kyuubi inside me? Why do people hate me then? I'm the reason Kyuubi isn't killing people. Don't you understand how seals work? Naruto asked himself confused. Naruto was silent, and just kept his gaze on the ground, and he didn't understand. Why did the fourth Hokage choose him? She chose him because she didn't have parents, and therefore was much more approachable to be a burden than someone with parents. Kurama looked at him with concern, written all over his face. While it is true, the citizens did not try to harm him, except 3 times. However, still, he knew that Naruto suffered from the amount of insults, glances thrown at him every day, but most importantly, he longed for love, someone whom he would call friend. Someone to call family. While Naruto was wondering why Kyuubi had attacked his village, sure everyone around him was saying that Kyuubi was a demon. But it was just that. Did he attack the village for no other reason than simply to be a demon? Go ahead, ask your questions. The Kyuubi laughed when he saw that the boy was facing the guilt of having his mind read. I have only one question. Why did you attack Konoha? He asked firmly before swallowing a bit when he saw the giant fox squint angrily. Their tails wagged a little while as he took a deep breath and to calm down. Apparently, it was a sensitive issue. A masked man with the Sharingan took me out of my previous container and put me under his control with that damn Keek and Genkai. Then they took me to your village and forced me to raise it until your 4th time came and sealed me in you. And that's how we got here. I must warn you that the man apparently needed my power for something far beyond just raising some human village. At least before he was stopped and released his control over me, just before I was resealed. In the future, to try to tear me away from you, and I don't need to tell you that, with this stamp, it will turn out in certain death for us, boy. The Kyuubi spoke with an angry tone. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the prospect of being married in the future because of what it contained. He decided to move on and worry about it later. Although Agoromo wanted to talk to Naruto, he was running out of time and needed to explain everything to him before leaving. Coughing and gaining the attention of both Kurama and Naruto, they turned their heads towards him. Kurama, you said you knew why the Uchiha clan didn't take over Naruto, so can you shed some light this way? He asked Agoromo calmly. Kurama looked at Naruto for a second, and he wasn't sure how the little blonde guy would react. Knowing that the only reason he was on his own was that Hokage had refused to have someone adopt him. The guy with the ponytail, like a cactus, had asked to raise Naruto. Still, the Hokage had refused, saying that Naruto would strengthen the influence of said clan and bring imbalance. Kurama didn't quite remember. But Naruto had been in the same room when that happened. Kurama had overheard the conversation, as Minato and Kushina had made sure that Kurama could help Naruto from the very beginning. On anything, and even talking to him, even without Naruto being in his mental landscape. Kurama, of course, understood why the Uchiha clan's request to raise Naruto was rejected. They had suspicions as to why Kyuubi had suddenly stopped and not dropped the Vihulu bomb in the middle of the village, just before being teleported by Minato. The Hokage refused any request from any clan to raise Naruto, as it would bring imbalance among the village. And you can guess why families without shinobi background did not try to adopt Naruto. Kurama spoke with a touch of anger but sadness. Well, Naruto's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Why is that? Why did you do this? He doesn't know that everyone else hates me. Don't you care about me? Naruto wondered, and feeling his chest hurt like never before, tears rolled down his cheeks. It wasn't enough that he lied to him about his parents, but denied him the right to be raised by a family that could have loved him. His chakra began to increase, and a loud scream escaped from his mouth. Naruto started hitting the ground with his fists. The ground broke like glass, crying and sobbing. His eyes hurt because someone had just burned his eyes. He felt his chest as if he wasn't breathing, and the pain was spreading all over his body like a disease. Kurama and Agoromo were about to confront him when suddenly trees grew up around Naruto, each with a pointed end, and growing without a real direction. Trees and branches even began to grow around the walls and ceiling. Naruto, calm down. You're not alone. You may feel lonely, but I am your friend, Kurama said with a kind tone. That surprised even Agoromo. The trees stopped growing, and slowly the trees that had grown around Naruto moved away, showing Naruto on his knees crying his eyes out. Slowly raising his head, both Goromo and Kurama gasped at the Rinnegan in both of their eyes. Rinnegan. Goromo thought, confused. He knew that Naruto would eventually possess the Rinnegan due to Senju Yukia's blood, but this was much earlier. Before he could say anything, the Rinnegan slowly disappeared, and his eyes turned blue again. The moment his eyes turned blue, Naruto felt dizzy, and everything started to faint. Slowly his body fell into the water. Naruto gasped and opened his eyes to see that he was still in the corner where he was hiding. But he saw that several trees had grown around him. He saw that there was no one walking down the streets were empty, and all he could see was the darkness surrounding the streets. The wind blowing and hitting his face, his sun-kissed hair dancing with the wind, Naruto. He could hear the faint sound of a cricket near him. Slowly getting up, he started walking and came out of the corner where he was hiding, only to feel several Zambu coming towards him. He turned in time to see old Okage appear in front of him and hug him. Naruto was taken aback. He thought about returning the hug for a moment, but he didn't know what to feel. He felt his anger rising like a raging river. He did not return the hug. Instead, he just had a blank look on his face and stared at an Ambo staring at them. The Ambu had a raven mask and a sword clenched behind his back, dark hair and dark eyes. But what caught Naruto's attention was his chakra. He could feel that her chakra was slightly similar to his. Iris in Sarutobi received information that Naruto was not in his apartment and Ambu could not find him. After searching around the village, everyone felt the sudden surge of power. When he got there, he was relieved and worried to see Naruto alone on the street. The old Okage noticed the trees that had grown and wondered why. But one thing that bothered him the most was that Naruto didn't return the hug and didn't feel relaxed in her presence. Like he used to, like always. This time, Sarutobi almost felt that Naruto wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. Walking away, he saw little Naruto trying to avoid his eyes. Instead, he looked down and had a blank expression on his face. Sarutobi noticed that Kakashi seemed worried about that. She knelt down at his height and decided to talk to him in his apartment. Naruto didn't say anything and remained silent the whole way to his apartment. She usually got excited every time I spent time with him. But this time it seemed like he wanted to do anything but that. Arriving at the apartment, Saruto entered first, followed by Naruto, who was still silent and refused to say anything. He walked to his sofa and sat down on it without looking at the window, deciding to break the growing silence between them. The old Okage coughed and walked close to Naruto. Naruto, what happened? Where were you? Did someone hurt you? Irison asked kindly, gently grasping her hands that were resting on her lap. Naruto flinched slightly at their contact, which Irison noticed. Nothing happened. I just fell asleep, and when I woke up, I saw the trees, Naruto replied, not looking at the Okage, still keeping his head down. Sarutobi sighed, knowing that he wasn't telling the whole truth, but decided not to pressure Naruto. Pushing his hands away, he stood up. Do you need anything, Naruto? The old Okage asked her, wanting to know if the blonde needed anything. Naruto wanted to scream, I need a family, but she kept him on her chest like a burden, and instead looked at the old man. I need books to read. The library really doesn't like it when the devil messes up its books. Naruto spoke with poison and spat when he said demon. Okage's eyes widened, not knowing that information. I hadn't thought that people could refuse to sell Naruto various essential things. Nodding his head. Anything else? Sarutobi asked, but Naruto just shook his head, and Sarutobi left the room. Naruto clenched his fist tightly in his lap. His pants were almost torn by the force of his fingers. He gritted his teeth, and anger grew inside him again. Naruto, don't worry. If you need to talk to someone, talk to me, Kurama suddenly spoke inside his head. Naruto was surprised to hear Kurama's voice, and a small smile formed on his face. He closed his eyes. Thank you, but I still didn't understand your name, Naruto said gratefully. My name is Kurama, Mikoso, Kurama replied with a slight smile on his face. Naruto nodded his head in understanding, and wondered why Kurama was kind to him. At the same time, he asked if he would ever meet Goromo again. He still had questions. From what he understood, Indra was looking for the strength of a single individual. while Asura thought that true power came from people working together. Naruto thought that both of them had the right, that the leader needs to be stronger than the others to protect them, while accepting the help of others and not relying only on his own strength. "Sleep, Naruto, we will start training tomorrow," Kurama said, and Naruto listened to him. Naruto soon reached an excellent training camp with the help of Kurama, and the Hokage had given him many books to study, and even weapons and ninja tools to train. Naruto woke up at 6 a.m., had breakfast and left the apartment. Soon he arrived at the training camp, and Kurama suggested to start by unblocking his chakra. "Well, now to unblock your chakra, and you need to meditate," he said, and saw Naruto raise an eyebrow, wanting me to give him more details. "Then what?" he asked, putting his hands behind his head. "Well, when you meditate, you will feel this feeling, and you will need to attract it to you," Kurama added. Remembering what Kushina had been through, Naruto quickly nodded his head and quickly sat down where he thought he was fine in a mediation position, keeping the fingers of his hands together. Naruto could feel the grass gently touching his legs every time the wind blew. He closed his eyes and began to concentrate on finding the feeling that Kurama was talking about. After a few minutes, Naruto felt a very warm feeling in his chest, warmer than even the fire. It felt like a fire in his chest. Soon the grass and trees around Naruto started to grow. The grass began to move violently around Naruto, almost as if there was a strong wind flying around. The ground began to split slightly around Naruto. The grass on his right side caught fire, and the one on the left side got soaked. In front of him, the grass split in half, almost like it was a blade, and behind Naruto, the grass turned brown and crumbled like dirt. Suddenly, his chakra exploded. Naruto released his chakra, but the chakra was in danger of being felt throughout the village. Kurama made sure to close it down before the whole village came here to see what was going on. When he opened his eyes, Naruto saw the results of his chakra. A few small trees had grown up around him, and the grass was a mess around him. While this was happening, a weasel-masked Ambo, Uchiha Itachi, was sitting on a nearby branch. The eldest son of the Uchiha clan leader was among the most trusted Zanbu of the Sandaime Hokage, along with Inwaka Ate Kakashi. Graduating from the academy at the age of 7, and joining the ranks of the elite Zanbu at the age of 11. Hitachi was considered the greatest Kono Agakure prodigy after Minato Namika and Kakashi attack, and the members of his clan even said that it was the second coming of Uchiha Madara. While sitting high on the branch of a tall tree, he carefully observed the young Naruto, who seemed to be meditating to unlock his chakra. It had been over an hour and Tachi. I was immensely impressed by the boy's patience. In general, children of this age tend to be impatient and hyperactive. He was sure that Naruto had reasonable control over his mind. The weasel-masked Ambo was one of the few people who knew that Naruto was the legacy of his late Yondaime Hokage and his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. Having personally met Minato and Kushina and Yondaime, she was like a father figure to him. Her mother had once said that she planned to threaten the Hokage for not allowing her to adopt Naruto. But her father was able to talk to her and not do something reckless. When Kakashi had left the village for some urgent mission, he had asked Itachi if he could take care of Naruto. And he immediately agreed to keep an eye on the young man. He knew what the child contained, and because of that, the child did not have any friends while growing up. And that reminded him a little of his own childhood. Because those who held great power often find themselves alone, even in the middle of a crowded crowd. Uchiha Itachi was by no means an arrogant person, but he knew that he was a powerful and intelligent shinobi, and he had not yet reached his prime age. She was surprised when the blonde opened his chakra, and it wreaked havoc on the training ground. To say he was surprised would be an understatement. He wondered how a child could have so much chakra, and he knew it wasn't because of the QB. "You can come out now. I know you're there," Naruto said. When she opened her eyes, she found herself face to face with a child she was carrying. A mask about 11 or 12 years old waving at him. "Hello, Naruto-kun," the masked weasel Ambu said kindly, as she offered her hand to a slightly wary rupee. Naruto didn't move a muscle for a few seconds as he stared at the masked shinobi in front of him. Due to his lack of positive interaction with people while growing up, he was always distrustful of them. He smiled in return as he didn't feel any negative feelings from the masked Ambo. Who are you, and why is an Ambu spying on me? He already knew the answer. Careful, huh? It's good to be, declared the masked weasel Ambu as he lowered his hand. You haven't answered my question yet, Naruto said, while still trying to feel some emotion from the masked Ambu. Looking at the young man for a few more seconds, Itachi took off his mask, exposing his face. Naruto was slightly surprised by the shinobi's actions. Naruto always thought that Sambus weren't supposed to show their faces unless ordered by the Hokage or if they weren't working. I'm not here to hurt you, Naruto-kun. I just wanted to talk, Itachi replied. He remained nailed in place so as not to raise any unnecessary suspicion in the mind of the child in front of him. Hearing everything about his Inu Senpa and gave a vague idea about the personality of the blonde. From what he heard, Naruto was much more mature, calm, and smarter than children his age. He could see his own reflection when he looked at the blonde. Why would you want to partner with me? Naruto asked, a little skeptically, to the black-haired Ambo. Itachi clearly noticed the awareness in the blonde's tone. I wasn't surprised or scared by Naruto's actions. In fact, he was impressed by the caution of the blonde. The tension of the biceps was a clear indication that the blonde still did not trust him. Growing up, Naruto never made any friends because the villagers had what resided inside of him. The same protected village Naruto tramples every day of his life. After all, it is part of human nature for people to fear for what they do not understand. Closing his eyes for a few seconds, he took a deep breath and made a decision about what he had to do. I wasn't a very impulsive person, but this was something I really wanted to do. Itachi calmly walked up to Naruto and gave him a light slap on the forehead. When Naruto looked up, his eyes widened at the small smile that was present on the shinobi's face. At that moment, Naruto felt a wave of happiness invade his mind. You're not what people think you are, Naruto. The villagers are mistaken and blinded by the hatred that darkens their minds. Don't think so badly of yourself. The shinobi world we live in is indeed a ruthless place. But we, the shinobi, are the ones who endure for a reason and protect what is important to us. Itachi explained. His mother had told Itachi to take care of Naruto whenever he could, and if he could, sometimes help him like an older brother would. Naruto smiled back at him as he himself witnessed the horrors of shinobi life from Kurama's perspective. So, are you going to give me your name? Naruto asked. If Itachi was embarrassed at that moment, he didn't show it on his face. My name is Itachi Uchiha. He introduced the black-haired teenager. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. Nice to meet you, Itachi-san, Naruto replied with a slight nod. Itachi was surprised by the moments. The boy's manners. Children of this age presented themselves as if they were chosen as the next chosen Hokage. Would you mind if he trained with you, Naruto-kun? Itachi asked. Naruto smiled and nodded his head. Very well, Naruto said. He took 5 steps back and turned to look to Itachi. The young Uchiha knew that Naruto didn't have a real position in taijutsu, but he decided to fix it once after this match. Soon both of them ran towards each other. Naruto! He first threw a punch at her face, but Itachi suddenly disappeared. Naruto immediately turned around, ready to kick him. The Uchiha grabbed him by the foot and threw him in the opposite direction. Naruto caught Itachi off guard, knowing that he was behind him. Naruto immediately got up and took a kunai from his bag, turning it in the direction of his finger. He ran again, running towards him, but he threw the kunai halfway. Itachi saw that the kunai was heading towards his chest and walked away, but then Naruto grabbed another kunai and threw it in the air, causing it to change direction. Itachi was surprised, but the kunai did not fly close to him despite changing direction. Seeing that, Itachi suddenly moved much faster, appearing behind Naruto and gently kicking his foot, making him fall to the ground. Naruto kept a cool head and wanted to try to get up again when he saw Itachi pointing his crib and at his face. The blonde young man stopped in his tracks. For a moment, he was afraid that Itachi was trying to hurt him. Still, she smiled and pushed the crib away, and before walking over to him and extending her hand, Naruto accepted the hand and stood up, waiting for Itachi to say that he was disappointed with him. Very well done, Naruto-kun. The idea of using the kunai and like that was a good one, Itachi said, smiling at him and rubbing his hair. much to the blonde's chagrin. Naruto smiled at the words. His face lit up like a candle. "You mean?" Naruto asked with a sense of insecurity in his voice. Itachi smiled again and nodded his head. She knelt down at his level, kissed his forehead with her fingers, and smiled. "Now, let's start a real training. Do as I tell you," Itachi said in a stern tone, and Naruto nodded his head in agreement. After a month. The next month, Itachi taught Naruto whenever he could. He was usually on missions, but sometimes he had time to teach Naruto about chakra control and other essential things. From sticking a leaf on his forehead to reading books about chakra, clans, and other important things. Naruto had liked the seals, after understanding that a seal could hold someone like Kurama on his stomach. The young blonde understood that there was a lot of potential hidden behind Fuinjutsu. At this moment, Naruto was gluing leaves on his forehead and swinging kuna and on his fingers. Itachi told him that this was an important lesson for chakra control. Kurama had also taught him a few things, but mostly helped him when he was tired, like giving him his chakra, so he could train for longer. Naruto spends at least 9 hours a day training Kenjutsu, Fuinjutsu, and Taijutsu. Kurama and Itachi told him that he could start learning ninjutsu once he had reasonable control of the chakra. And, according to Kurama, it wouldn't take long. Naruto had asked Furball if he should tell Itachi something about what he learned from Agoromo, but Kurama was against it. He said that despite everything, Itachi was loyal to the village. And Naruto didn't say anything to old Okage about Goromo, or that he was a reincarnation of Indra and Asura Otsutsuki, because he still felt bitter about having rejected the request of any clan to raise him. Why is that? Naruto didn't know why a family like everyone else couldn't raise him. Am I really a monster? Naruto quickly shook his head in denial. The leaves on his forehead and the cradle and fell to the grass. The blonde young man kept a stoic face, but inside he felt as if someone had stabbed his heart. Getting up, he looked at his palms. The symbol of the moon and the sun still confused him. Walking around the training ground, his hands behind his head, he thought about his parents. Before he could think of anything, he suddenly felt 2 chakras rushing towards him, jumping, a sword cutting through the air. Naruto's eyes widened at the sight of the masked shinobi with a katana in his hand. "Who are you?" Naruto exclaimed, jumping away, jumping towards a tree. He turned his head just in time to see another ambo ready to cut him off. Naruto watched the sword move slower and slower towards his face. Naruto didn't have time to think about what was happening to him before he jumped away from the Chunin-level speed attack. Usually, anyone else would be surprised with the child, but they felt and seemed as impassive as a stone. Landing on his feet, Naruto grabbed a crib and out of his bag, and was ready to defend himself. These were ambu and much stronger than him, and not to mention there were 2 of them. The blonde knew he couldn't leave them behind. I was a child, and being able to escape from an ambo would be impossible. Naruto, you need my help, Kurama said angrily. Suddenly, Naruto became engulfed in red chakra and his eyes changed. He now had a fully grown Sharingan in each eye and a red slit. His nails grew on his hands, twice as long, his whiskers looked darker and darker, his hair became spiky. A red layer of chakra surrounded him. It almost seemed made of bubbles. A tail slowly grew behind his back. He was standing on his 4, looking at the ambo in front of him. Before the ambus could do anything, Naruto roared at the nearest ambu, sending a shockwave, throwing him against a tree. Naruto immediately ran to the second one. He moved his right hand forward, and the chakra layer surrounding his hand expanded and moved towards the ambu. The hand made of chakra looked 5 times bigger than expected. The ambu avoided the attack, but Naruto was already behind him and cut off his back. His blood flew like a waterfall around Naruto too, but he didn't have time to think as the second ambu was behind him, ready to stab him. Then, suddenly, a third hand made of chakra came out of his back and grabbed the sword before it could penetrate his back. Naruto immediately moved his right hand and opened his stomach. His guts fell to the ground, blood stained the grass red. The ambo fell to his knees, but he did not make any sound, did not even move his hands. About his wound. To try and keep his insides in. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw what he had just done. The body began to burn, and soon there was nothing left but ashes. The chakra layer surrounding Naruto disappeared, and the blonde fell to his knees. Tears were running down his cheeks, his eyes opened like a plate, and his heart was beating in his throat like a hammer. "I'm a monster." "No," Kurama interjected before he could finish what he wanted to say. "Don't even think for a minute that you are a monster. You are not a monster, and the monster is the one who sends these people to kill you. A monster is people who threaten to kill a baby in front of his parents. A monster is when someone kills a small child for no other reason than the rush of blood. Not you. A monster is when someone forces you to kill the only people you could call friends. A monster is when it forces you to kill countless people for no reason," Kurama said with honesty in his voice. Just by mentioning it, Kurama remembered when he attacked the village when Kushina left the world. Naruto fell silent and thought about what he said. The blonde guy wasn't stupid, and he knew what Itachi and everything. All the shinobi lay mainly on their missions. After an hour of nothing but silence, with dry cheeks, he got up. "Thank you, Kurama." Naruto spoke in a tone of relief and happiness, happy to have someone like Kurama with him all the time. "Let's go back to your apartment," Kurama said. Kurama had made sure that his chakra didn't expand and be detected by everyone during the fight, but still, someone could have sensed Naruto. Tomorrow, Yugao Suki was the main swordsman of Konohagakure no Sato. Her skill with the sword far exceeded the basic instruction that constituted the minimum training granted to the Zom, within whose ranks she was assimilated. As a member of her ninja village's Black Ops division, Yugao had been exposed to missions that most of the ninja within the village's ranks couldn't even imagine. Considering this facet of his life, Yugao was understandably upset when the third Kage, Irisin Sarutobi, assigned him the task of keeping an eye on Konoha's resident outcast and troublemaker. At the same time, squad rotation policies were being implemented. The vast majority of the adult population of Konoha was well aware of the fact that Naruto Uzumaki was acting as the host and jailer of the most powerful entity known to civilization as a result of a clever deed of the deceased fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze. In a desperate attempt to save the village he was sworn to protect, Minato sacrificed his life to contain the Kyuubi Yoko inside Naruto. Unfortunately, Naruto was seen as a physical representation of the suffering and carnage caused by Kyuubi's attack on Konoha. As such, many of the villagers indulged in the therapeutic act of destroying the 9-year-old's body and spirit, in order to get some kind of compensation for their losses. During one of these therapeutic sessions, Yugao was able to track Naruto being chased by a burly and inebriated member of Konoha's civilian population. A few moments earlier, the aforementioned civilian had seen Naruto walking. Naruto turned around at the sound of a wooden box being kicked aside. The drunk man had a large piece of metal in his hand, ready to harm Naruto, but to the Zambu's surprise, Naruto dodged the attack and just walked away, not wanting to deal with drunk idiots. Yugao reported the night's events to the Hokage as soon as he could verify that Naruto had arrived at his apartment. A small smile adorned his features as he watched the boy crash onto his couch and fall asleep with a smile of his own stuck firmly on his face. When he arrived at his commander's office, he told him the events of the night in unerring detail. It was clear to the elder Hokage that Agent Ambu was particularly proud of how the young man had defended himself. The unmistakable hint of pride is what led to the current topic of conversation between the couple. "Okusama," Yugao spoke reverently, "if you allow, I would like to teach Naruto the basics of Kenjutsu, so that he can be prepared for such situations when the need arises." He was facing a drunk man who had no formal training in any form of combat. The Hokage turned to face the huge window of his office as he pondered the request for his position. Irisin loved the boy very much and was painfully aware of the mistreatment to which he was subjected on a daily basis. The idea proposed by Yugao appealed to him a lot until he realized that the members of his council, both ninja and civilians, would be in an uproar if they knew that the village paria was being instructed by one of his ninja firm elite. The following actions would only cause Naruto more harm than good, as more members of the population might be tempted to cause bodily harm to the child. When the Hokage turned to face Yugao, he identified his commander's defeated shoulder drop and correctly assumed that he would not be given the answer. Answer in the affirmative. Yugao-chan began the Hokage by looking into her eyes, conveying his thoughts on the matter to her with the mere direction. "I understand, Okage-sama." Yugao picked up the signals quickly. However, she decided to continue. "I just wish there was some way to convey instructions to the child." The pain was clear in his eyes, even if it was only masked behind his determination. That statement sparked an idea in the Okage's mind. The problem arose from private tutoring and the reallocation of the skills of a competent ninja towards a lost cause, in the eyes of both councils, but not from the transmission of instruction. "Yugao-chan, I want a critical evaluation of Naruto's physical and mental abilities, the best you can send within a week from today, along with a recommended training program for the child to compensate for any lack in any of the criteria." "I can't. You have spent time teaching the child, as this would be frowned upon by the unfortunate council. But maybe you can convey your knowledge in written form." Yugao turned his eyes to meet the Okage's. The idea was right, since instilling the basics of combat does not require an active tutor. Naruto could learn from the scrolls about proper exercises, basic kenjutsu. If he took the matter seriously, he would instill discipline in his life, a very important value for a kenjutsu disciple. Nodding sharply to his commander and waving quickly, Yugao put the mask back on and disappeared in a flurry of leaves. The Okage sighed once more. Sure, a major problem was about to be solved, but why was his ninja insisting on leaving his office using a leaf shunsin? They always left leaves in his office. He sighed, a headache about to rip his head open. Itachi had informed him that Naruto was perfectly healthy, while that brought happiness to his old heart. He couldn't help but remember the voice and face Naruto had the last time he saw him. He wondered when Jiraiya would return. Naruto desperately needed someone in his life, but old Sanin mentioned in his last letter that he had decided to meet Naruto once he became Genin. At the same time, that sounded good on paper. Sarutobi knew that it was a long 7 years for the poor boy. Seeing the sadness, he returned to his formalities. Naruto. Back in his mindscape, Naruto was in front of Kurama's cage, and his mindscape had changed slightly. Now, instead of just a boring hallway with water on the floor, there were trees around now. Kurama had said that he liked the new mindscape better. "Why are you calling me Kurama?" Naruto asked, knowing that there must be a reason why Hairball called him. The giant fox, instead of responding, simply turned his head to his right. As Naruto turned around, he saw Goromo standing there, but one thing Naruto noticed immediately, as he seemed more transparent, almost as if he was slowly disappearing. "Goromo-sama, why are you here?" Naruto asked respectfully, looking at the older man, giving the young blonde a small smile. "I need to tell you something before I disappear. It has something to do with your father," he claimed, and Naruto had all his attention on him.